Okay, so this week's Parsha is Parshas Bereishis, begins on page 3 in the Article Chumash. You would think it would begin on page 1, but it never does. Yeah, so yeah, it has all that. And 2 is but you would think also, our sages say that the Torah would start with the letter Aleph, the first letter, and it doesn't, it starts with the Beis. Right. So things don't always go as you expect. So it begins in the beginning of God's creating the heaven and the earth, when the earth was astonishingly empty with darkness upon the surface of the deep, and the divine presence hovered upon the surface of the waters, Hashem said, "Let there be light," and there was light. I'll read and then go back, because there's a lot to talk about. Hashem saw that the light was good, and Hashem separated between the light and the darkness. Hashem called to the light day, and the darkness he called night, and there was evening, there was morning one day. So there's a lot going on here. Art Scroll translates mostly based on Rashi. I've commented on this a lot. He translates mostly based on Rashi. I usually study the Parsha and understand it more with the commentary of the Ramban. Rashi was I'd say the primary commentary that the Chumash is learned with, which is why that's where Art Scroll goes by. The Ramban was a little later in history, just a little bit. He was from Spain. Rashi was from France and Germany. Yes, Alan? You got a question? How on the Rabbi class? He's still doing that. To cover this verse, probably years. Probably what I just read probably took him years. He's still in this parsha. Yeah, that was the joke. Is that Rabbi Nidickman? We're doing this week in like 15 minutes. What Rabbi Nidickman took him 12 years. I think 12 years. Yeah. Okay. But so Rashi translates it in the beginning of God's creating the heaven and the earth, when the earth was astonishingly empty. There are a number of different ways to read it. Classically, it's translated as in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. But there's disagreement about the wording, about the grammar. So this is how Rashi translates it. He says this is the simple way to translate it, and there are midrashic approaches as well. And one of them is Bereishis, would be for the sake of Reishis, what is called Reishis, for the sake of what's called the first. Hashem created heaven and earth. And what is that? What's the first? The Jewish people are called the first. And there's places that the Jewish people are called Reishis Oni, the first of my firstborn. And the Torah is called Reishis as well. So it's for because of the Torah, etc. Okay, so it says, in the beginning of Hashem's creating the heaven and the earth, and in verse 2, when the earth was astonishingly empty with darkness upon the surface of the deep, and the divine presence hovered upon the surface of the water. Oh, yeah. I started and didn't finish. So I usually go with the Ramban. So the Ramban understands this verse, in the beginning, Hashem created the heaven and the earth. Meaning that, and Rashi's also bothered that we see later Hashem separated the waters, meaning all 6 days Hashem created the heavens and the earth. The Ramban, though, understands that the Hebrew word here used for the creation is bria, bara, Hashem created. And he says creation means taking nothing and bringing something into existence. He's saying that they call them, I think, ex nihilo in Latin. It means that Hashem created something from nothing. And that, the Ramban said, only happened in the first moment of creation. That was in the beginning, Hashem created heaven and earth, meaning in the beginning, Hashem created all material, anything that went into the creation of heaven and earth, that was created in the first moment of creation. And the way the Ramban describes it is that it was all compressed. It was all compressed into like one single point. I think it's the size of a barley seed or something along those lines. And then Hashem caused it to expand, and everything that was in that point is what the world was created from, which is very similar to what is understood now as the Big Bang. But this is Ramban talking in the 1100s or 1200s, sometime around then. Yes. So the Ramban understands Bereishis, in the beginning Hashem created the heavens and the earth. The heavens means whatever is involved in the creation of the spiritual world, which is, there are a number of different levels of existence. the same way, the best mashal I have for that is that you have we're living as a body moving through the world, but at the same time, we're composed of smaller elements. So really what we are is physically at least, is a large group of cells that are really acting in unison and somehow moving this big group together. And that's what our existence is, that if a person looks at a deeper level or a more microscopic level, each cell is made out of atoms. So each cell is really a large group of atoms that are working in unison to be a cell and to act as a cell acts. And the person is made up of all these cells acting in unison, which is really all these atoms acting in unison. So if you look at what's happening when a person moves through the world, you could look at it whole completely different worlds depending on what you're looking at. And this is true spiritually as well, is that a person is a body in a physical world, but on another level, a person is a spiritual being in a spiritual world. And since we're tied to this physical body, we can't necessarily see that explicitly with our eyes, with our physical, because it's a spiritual nature, not a physical nature, but there's a spiritual existence as well. And in the first beginning of creation, Hashem created whatever is involved in the creation of the spiritual world, that's the Shemayim, the heavens, and whatever is involved in the physical world, that's the land. And then in verse 2, when the earth was astonishingly empty, once again based on Rashi, the Hebrew there is tohu vavo. Rashi translates it like exceedingly empty. The Ramban understands, he says that everything in the world is really made out of one thing that takes two forms. The Ramban says that there's the form is really a hard word to use, because the Ramban says that this material, whatever it is, that everything in the world is composed of, he says is this thing, he calls it hiyuli, he says the Greeks call it hiyuli, or highly, I wouldn't know how to pronounce that. But he says it's without form. It's like the potential without the form. And then he's saying it becomes matter, it becomes material when it takes form, which I would understand, and I've seen this interpreted elsewhere as energy and matter, where now we understand with Einstein's theory of relativity that matter and energy are just two forms of the same thing, where matter is where the energy actually is substantiated in a physical, I guess energy is also physical, but right, yeah, something, once again, beyond me. I'm not I know that there's such a theory, more than that. I couldn't explain it. But okay, so the Ramban understands that the world was tohu vavo. It was just a jumble of these two, I'd like to say, energy and matter, and darkness upon the surface of the deep, and with the divine presence hovering upon the surface of the waters. And he also understands the darkness, the deep, and the surface of the waters, not to be referring to the physical, to water, and he understands it to be the elements that the world's built on. But okay, in verse 3, it says, Hashem said, let there be light, and there was light. Hashem saw that the light was good, and Hashem separated between the light and the darkness. Here also, our sages ask that we're holding on day one, as we'll see. We're holding on day one, and the things that give us light, which are the sun, the moon, the stars, were created on the fourth day. So what was this light that it's referring to? If there was no sun, no moon, no stars, what was giving light? And they say that this wasn't a physical light. It was a spiritual light that Hashem created and hid away for the righteous in the world to come. Okay.
That's my granddaughter's name.
What's that?
Lila.
Lila, yes. Yeah. And so here it says that to the darkness, Hashem called Lila. So you can say she's the darkness. Okay. Wow. Okay, very good. That's her job.
I think yours is wild now.
Yep. He's an adventure. So in verse 5, once again, Hashem called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and there was evening, there was morning one day. So our sages say that there was evening, there was morning. that this is telling us that in Judaism, first comes evening and then comes morning, that the day follows the night. And that's why Shabbos and Yantif Shabbos starts Friday night, not Shabbos day, because first comes the night, not the day. And the commentaries also.
That's why yard sites first
right.
comes the
night, then the day, exactly. And that's sourced from here. And another thing is that you'll notice it says, and there was evening, there was morning one day. If you looked at the next ones in verse 6, or I'm sorry, verse 8, and there was evening, there was morning a second day. And in 13, and there was evening, there was morning a third day. That there it's a comparison. It's a second and third, whereas in verse 5, it doesn't say the first day, which would be similar to the next ones. It says one day. The Hebrew is Yom Echad, not Yom Rishon. And to that, there are a number of interpretations. Yeah, exactly. It's the number, not the ordinal, maybe. I don't know. Okay. So yeah, so Rashi says it's Yom Echad, meaning it's the day where there was one, that the only thing in existence was Hashem. It was the day of one, the day of Hashem, where there was nothing else in existence. And afterwards, Hashem created other things. But the Ramban says that, like you said, what an ordinal is kind of a comparison when you have a number of things to order. So you have the first one, the second one, the third one. But the first day, that was the only day that ever existed. So it wasn't a first day because first is a reference point to other things. So if you have one thing, that isn't the first one. That's the only one. It's
right. That's like when I tell my students, and when they write a term paper, you can't have just one.
Exactly, because
the second one that follows. Same kind of idea. Okay.
Yes. In computers, we always have lists of one, but that's a different story. Yeah, the index is 0. Maybe that's why. Anyway, there's evening, there was morning, one day. So it's the one day because until there are 2 days, there's no reference point that this is before that one to order them. Okay, so now moving on page 5. The second day, Hashem said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Let it separate between water and water. So Hashem made the firmament and separated between the waters which were beneath the firmament, the waters that were above the firmament, and it was so. Hashem called the firmament heaven, and there was evening and there was morning a second day. So the Ramban says that this is not the same heaven that's referred to in the first verse, where it says in the beginning Hashem's created heaven and earth. That heaven, he said, is referring to the spiritual realm, the spiritual universe. Whereas this heaven this firmament is referring to the sky, meaning the physical sky, which is the separation between the upper waters, the lower waters. And he called that heaven the same thing that he called the spiritual world. The Malbim understands this, the heaven, the sky, as the atmosphere, which separates between the waters that are related to the earth. It stops the waters on earth from escaping to space, and then we'd run out of water if it evaporates and leaves the atmosphere. Eventually we'd have no water. And it also it keeps the higher waters away, the waters that aren't for the earth. It keeps them away from us, the comets and whatever chunks of ice that are floating out there in space. The atmosphere protects us from that as well. That's the firmament, it's the sky. That's our protection from the waters that come from the outside. Okay, so now the third day in verse 9, Hashem said, let the waters beneath the heavens be gathered unto one area, let the dry land appear, and it was so. So now, whereas until now the whole earth was covered in water, so the water is separated from the land. Hashem called the dry land earth, and the gathering of waters he called seas. And Hashem saw that it was good. And Hashem said, let the earth sprout vegetation, herbage yielding seeds, fruit trees yielding fruit of each kind, containing its own seed upon the earth, and it was so. And the earth brought forth vegetation, herbage yielding seed after its kind, and trees yielding fruit, each containing its seed after its kind. And Hashem saw that it was good. And there was evening, there was morning, a third day. So now the third day, Hashem separated between the ground and the dry land from the water, and Hashem brought plants into existence, plant life into existence. And you'll notice when by all the creations it says that Hashem said something, and then Hashem saw that it was good. So the Ramban says this: saying doesn't mean that a speech that Hashem made, and seeing doesn't mean that Hashem has eyes and there's vision that Hashem's seeing. Rather, when Hashem says, that means that Hashem causes something to happen. It's causing an action to take place, and Hashem, that's Hashem says, and Hashem sees, and it was good means that Hashem kept it and said it should remain existing. Okay, now moving on, verse 14, the fourth day, Hashem said, let there be luminaries in the firmaments of the heaven to separate between the day and the night, that there should be these lights in the sky, and they shall serve as signs for festivals, for days, and for years. They shall serve as luminaries in the firmaments of the heaven to shine upon the earth. So these lights in the sky, the sun, the moon, the stars, they're signs. We use them for direction. We use the moon for decided for knowing when the festivals are, and we use the sun, how the sun for knowing when one day begins, the next day begins, and when a year begins. And it was so. And then Hashem made, in verse 16, Hashem made two great luminaries, the greater luminary to dominate the day, and the lesser luminary to dominate the night, and the stars, the sun, the moon, and the stars. And Hashem set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, to dominate by day and by night, and to separate between the light and the darkness. And Hashem saw that it was good, and there was evening, and there was morning, a fourth day. So the commentaries ask that we already said the first day, it said there was evening, there was morning, a first day. Second day, there's evening, there's morning, a second day. Now we're saying on the fourth day, Hashem creates the sun and the moon and the stars, and so before there was the sun, before the earth was rotating the sun, what was a day? What was a night? What was a day? So Rav Moshe Sternbuch says that you see from here that the concept of day and night is really independent of the sun, of the earth's rotation around the sun, or of that cycle of the sun where you have light, where it's light and then it's dark, and really it's completely independent because one side of the earth is day, one side is night. There's no time that like now it's day, now it's night. Because different places have different times, different timings. And so he says that you see that Hashem made a 24-hour period that some of it is day, some of it is night, and somewhat independent of the sun. The halacha is, once the fourth day, Hashem said that we follow the sun as what decides what's day or night. So he says, and because this may be relevant halachically in a place, if you go far enough north, or far enough south, I guess also, you could come to a place that doesn't really have, it could have, the sun doesn't set for months at a time, or the sun, yes, it could be dark for months at a time. So so he says, so what do? Do you not have day or night? Is that all like one long day and you might never like get to the holidays because like it takes years to get through a cycle of night or day? And he says, you see from here that day or night is not necessarily dependent on what the sun does. And in a place where the sun doesn't set it doesn't set every day, then he says perhaps it's dependent on Eretz Yisrael.
That's when I went.
Yeah.
I asked somebody and it was a river reform.
Yeah.
I asked the guy, I was talking to the guy, and I could tell you Seattle or somewhere. But did they when the Shabbos start? Yeah, I mean it got dark there for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Anyway, he just said they went by Seattle.
Oh yeah, the closest really.
Place.
That's interesting. No, so if the sun would set, I think they would halachically we would go with the setting of the sun. And I know in places like Manchester in England, or I think it's Manchester, maybe Gateshead. I don't remember which one it is. That's like really far north England.
Scotland.
Yeah, it's like 3 hours.
Right, so they could have some like really, really, really late starts to Shabbos and ends for that fast day could end at like 10, 11 o'clock at night.
I got there 11.
Yeah. Yeah. The fast day could be very difficult.
In the winter.
Yes.
In the winter, when the earth is tilted away from the sun, then we have periods of 24 hours of darkness up in the Arctic.
Yes, that's what we're referring to. And when that happens, so according to Moshe Sternbuch, he says, you see from here that it could be that the day and that one day to the next, at least, would not be dependent on the sun. on the sun setting, because we see that there was evening, there was morning before the sun even existed. Yes. In Wisconsin, was it that way?
Oh,
No, not far enough north.
20 hours of darkness. We had
What's
day
that?
and night. We had day and night every day.
Okay.
But now see it, but we had it.
Yeah, he didn't necessarily see it, but he had it. It was late. Okay. Not exactly related, but when during the Holocaust, when the Mir Yeshiva and some other groups fled to Japan, so there was a big problem that so there's an international dateline where it changes from one day and the next as a consequence of time zones. That like at time zone, you can't keep on going up an hour because you'll just go around and keep on going up. So there has to be one point where it stops going up and it's the next day. And where that international dateline is legally is not necessarily the same as where it is halachically. And there was a question as to in Japan, which side of the halachic international dateline it's on. That if it ends, let's say if it ends at the end of Russia, like in the ocean there, like once you get to the end of the continent, where technically Japan's part of the continent of Asia, but it's across the part of the ocean. So if the international dateline is, or China, whatever it is at the end of the mainland continent, so then that Japan would be on the other side, but maybe not. There's a question. And I think they were people who were keeping 2 days of Shabbos because of that question. And it got close to Yom Kippur, and which would be a major problem. Yom Kippur would be a tremendous problem because you can't even eat at night, which means they would have to eat, not fast. They'd have to fast 48 hours straight. And I believe before Yom Kippur, the Japanese didn't want them around and moved them to Shanghai. They were in Kobe, Japan, moved them to Shanghai, which was a Japanese-controlled Chinese city in China. And that actually helped them out because that was removed the doubt. And now they were certainly within the halachic dateline.
Actually, the dateline doesn't.
Right. So that the halachically it would be different than there. That's a convenience where it's put to like avoid islands and it's just to cut through the least amount of land because you don't want like one house on one side being one day, the house on the other side being the other day. It would be chaos. So they put it in a convenient spot where it's avoiding pretty much any land. But halachically, that's not necessarily where it is. So, but I think there were some people who were left behind who actually kept 2 days of Yom Kippur. Or they had to keep 2 days of Yom Kippur. But what they did is that there was one that they held the halacha is this one, but you have to be concerned about that one. The one that they held that was a somewhat astringency or because of the doubt. So they did what they called eating shiurim. That means that they would drink a small amount at a time under what would be considered a proper eating halachically. So something we're not allowed to do except in cases of great need. So for example, if someone's sick and the doctor says that it could be life-threatening for them to fast. So if they could, once again, if someone has to eat, they eat. If it could be life-threatening, let's say someone's diabetic and their blood sugar is crashing in a way they need sugar, they eat. That the life's in danger, you eat. But if it's a case where they could get away with this, so we would just eat a small amount. It's like a little less than a shot glass of water, let's say, or a drink every 10 minutes, and less than, I think Rabbi said about a cracker. It's the size of a dried date, I think, every 10 minutes. So that's what they did to to keep Yom Kippur in at least a more lenient way for one of the days than kept the real Yom Kippur the other day. But yeah, time and halacha could be very fascinating, and the ramifications of halacha. Okay, let's continue in verse 20 on page 7. Verse 20. Hashem said, "Let the waters teem with teeming living creatures and fowl that fly over the earth across the expanse of the heavens." So the waters are teeming with living creatures, fish, and sea creatures, and birds that fly in the air. And Hashem created the sea giants and every living being that creeps, with which the water teems after their kind, and all the winged fowl of every kind. And Hashem saw that it was good. Hashem blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the sea, for the fowl shall increase on the earth." And there was evening, there was morning, a fifth day. And you find Hashem said, "Bless them, especially the fish, be fruitful and multiply." And fish have a tremendous amount of young at once. Right, and this is where first life Hashem created was in the sea. Yes. Yes. And like fish lay, from what I understand, thousands, if not more than that, of eggs at once. They produce a tremendous amount of young, and then a lot of them get eaten. But there are a tremendous amount of fish in the sea, as they say. Not as much as there used to be, but okay.
Eggs are
Yes.
Other animals.
The eggs, the young, the plankton, like as they're growing. Okay. In verse 24, the krill, Hashem said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures, each according to its kind." So this is day 6. Animals and creeping things and beasts of the land. So animals, insects and rodents perhaps, and beasts of the land, each according to its kind. And it was so. Hashem made the beasts of the earth according to its kind, and the animal according to its kind, and every creeping being of the ground according to its kind. And Hashem saw that it was good. So here Hashem created animal life. And on page 9, we come to the creation of man. So yes, verse 26. And Hashem said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. They shall rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and over the animals, the whole earth, and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." They rule over it. The Hebrew is a little more than rule over it. It's vayirdu. That means like they dominate it. That say it's more than rule over, more than like a king. It's more like a master over a slave. That is like complete domination. You see that man affects the world to such an extent. And in verse 27, so Hashem created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. So a few things here. What does it mean in our image, in our likeness? And what does it mean, let us make man? Who's making man? So there are two approaches. I think it's the Ramban who said that let us is that, we'll see later, it gives more detail in the creation of man. It says that Hashem formed man from the earth. And so it's Hashem along with the earth were partners in making man. But the Medrash says that this is Hashem speaking to the angels, who and Hashem saying, "Let us make man," because man is the closest thing in creation to angels, meaning that we're what's the word? Aware beings. That we're not animals. That we have awareness, we have agency, we're able to have complex so I don't want to say social interactions, but complex judgment. We can be, but we're able to have complex judgment. We have judgment, and yes, so. And that's what it means in our image. And because Hashem, in a sense, almost creating competition for angels, similar creatures. So the Medrash says Hashem is teaching us derech eretz. The Torah is teaching us the right of the way that we should act. And this is being modeled by Hashem in the Torah, is that if we're doing something that affects someone else, we should consult with them first. Even if what they say, even if we've made our decision, what they say doesn't matter, but it's derech eretz. It's proper. It's the proper way of acting that you should let someone know, that you should consult with them before acting if what you're doing affects them. And in our image, in our likeness, the Meshech Chochmah explains, means that a being, Hashem is making a being that can make moral judgments, that makes decisions based on morality, not just instinct. Okay, and in verse 27. So Hashem created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And the Medrash says that male and female created them means that actually, originally, man was created in one body, male and female together. And later on, they were split apart. And so why was it that they were created together? Why didn't Hashem just create the same way that when Hashem created animal life, Hashem created male and female animals. Even when Hashem created plant life, Hashem created male and female plants. As we find, I learned, I was in Kroger once, and this I helped. There was an elderly lady who was trying to read something. I got it for her, and she was all excited. Old Italian lady, but from Italy, with the accent and everything. And she was excited to meet me, and she told me, she was showing me on the peppers something that she learned. And I've learned with Italians, you listen when they're talking about these kind of Mediterranean vegetables, or whatever it is. But she was telling me that how to tell the difference between a male pepper and a female pepper. Yes, and they're different. Pepper, like a red pepper.
Oh,
That
well, I guess, no,
It's-
actually, you got,
a lot of fruit, a lot of trees and a lot of plants need to cross-pollinate. They need, and there are male flowers and female flowers, or male plants and male trees, female, I don't know how it works, but
my face,
yes.
Colors.
Yeah, well, whatever it is, but they need cross-pollination, and they're right, whatever it is, but they have male peppers and female peppers. So why did Hashem create man and let me continue. Why did Hashem create man and woman together? Why didn't Hashem create them separate like everything else? And he says it's so a man and woman, they could understand that when they're alone, that they're missing something, that there's something missing, they're incomplete, and which creates a drive to pair up. Yeah. It's that that Hashem created us together, and when we're not together, we're missing a piece of ourselves. We're incomplete. Okay, so moving on. In verse 29, Hashem said, "Behold, I have given you all the herbage yielding." Oh, in verse 28, Hashem blessed them, and Hashem said to them, "Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and every living thing that moved on the earth." And this is really the first mitzvah, in a sense, not a mitzvah to the Jewish people, but to mankind, is be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. Okay, so in verse 29, Hashem said, "Behold, I have given you all herbage yielding seed that is on the surface of the entire earth, and every tree that is sealed yielding fruit. It shall be yours for food." So meaning I'm giving you plant life, to fruits and plant life, and to every beast of the earth, every bird of the sky, to everything that moves on the earth within which there's a living soul, anything alive. Every green herb is for food, and it was so. Notice that man was not given animals for food, animal life for food, and our sages say and in fact, man was not allowed to eat animals. We were vegetarians, maybe even vegans, I don't know, but we were at least vegetarians until Noah saved all animal life in the Teva, in the ark. At that point, he was given the rights to eat meat, but until then, he was not. Okay.
In my Chumash, there's a little line that says, "You may also eat the meat of animals that die naturally."
I don't know. That's a question. Actually, if you're in the art scroll, for those who have the art scroll, if you look at the note in verse 29 and 30, and this is really based on Rashi, but it says, most commentators group these verses together, "Shall be yours for food and for every beast of the earth," indicating that man and beast shared the same herbal diet. At this time, man was forbidden to kill animals for food, which would imply, like you're saying, that they were allowed to, if the animals were dead already, they would be allowed to eat it, but they weren't allowed to kill them. I'm not ready to say that. Rashi, the way Rashi speaks it out is, which would translate as that permission was not given to Adam and his wife to kill a creature and to eat meat. So once again, it sounds like the killing is the problem, not necessarily the eating. What's that?
Maybe those were the problem.
Well, he's saying to kill in order to eat the meat would be the problem. So it would imply that they would be able to have roadkill. Yeah. Okay. Yes, okay. Okay, so in verse 31, and God saw that he had made all that he had made. Behold, it was very good. This is the first time we have very good. And there was evening, there was morning, the sixth day. So whereas all the again, another difference here, we said the first day was day one, not the first day. By the sixth day, by all the other ones, it says a fifth day, a fourth day. If you look there in verse 19, a fourth day. In verse 23, a fifth day. Here it's the sixth day, whereas by other ones it says Yom Chamishi, let's say, a fifth day. Here it's Yom Hashishi, that hey is the definite article, the sixth day. So what's the reason for that? So the Medrash says that, I think I have even mentioned this a few weeks ago, but might have even been last week, that no, it's Hazino. In Parshas Hazino, I mentioned this, is that it's a reference to the sixth day. What's the sixth day? The day the Torah was given, or the day of Shavuos, the 6th of Sivan, is the sixth day. It's saying that the world was created for the giving and dependent on the Jewish people receiving the Torah. And so that's the sixth day is a reference to that sixth day, the day that we received the Torah. Okay, so now moving on. This
Did it
verse
come
should
out
be
the
familiar.
seventh day?
Yes?
Did it come out really the seventh day because Moshe delayed it?
I don't know. It's a disagreement in the Gemara. So maybe it's the day that we celebrate the receiving the Torah, which is the 6th of
Right.
Sivan.
Right.
Meaning it's for that. That's the day that we accept. It's meaning every year. It's Shavuos isn't just a celebration of what happened before. It's something. It's a continuous. Every year, Shavuos is us receiving the Torah and us accepting the Torah. So perhaps. Okay, on page 11, chapter 2. Thus, the earth were finished and all their array. By the seventh day, Hashem completed his work which he had done, and he abstained on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. Hashem blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because on it he abstained from all his work which Hashem created to make. So what does that mean? So this should be familiar, just as an aside. This is what we say Friday night, and shul we say it as part of the Friday night Kiddush. Vayichulu hashemayim va'aretz b'chol tzva'am vayichal Elokim bayom hashvim malachta asher asah. So we say it as part of services Friday night. We say it as part of Kiddush Friday night. So what does that mean that he abstained on the seventh day from all his works which he had done? And we call it the seventh day of creation, but here it seems it's a seventh day of abstaining. So our sages say that Hashem looked at the world and said, what's it lacking? It's lacking rest, menucha. And Hashem created rest on the seventh day. That's what was created. So what does that mean? In what way is rest a creation? So Rabbi Shimon Schwab understands it, that until now, it's kind of a little bit splitting hairs, but until now, the world was continuous. Anything that in the world that was existing to an active creation by Hashem. There was a constant act of creation. There was no such concept of something existing because it existed before, of being at rest. It's almost like inertia didn't exist, and things existed because Hashem willed them to exist there, and then at that position, whatever, Hashem's creating it at that moment, and Hashem's creating it at the next moment, and creating it at the next moment. On Shabbos, Hashem created the concept of things continuously existing. That's the rest that was created. And in verse 3, it says, Hashem blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. What does that mean? So in what way did Hashem bless the seventh day and sanctify it? So Rashi brings the Medrash. Where is it? That he blessed it with the man, that in the manna we got a double portion on Friday, that instead of that every day when we were in the desert, the man fell, the food for that day fell. But it did not fall on Shabbos, and instead we got a double portion on Friday for Shabbos. And that's the blessing, that we had a double portion in order to, that we had a double portion before Shabbos. So I think I don't remember who I saw ask it. I know I heard a similar vart from Arishiva, so I'll say from Arishiva. I think also Moshe Sternbach says similar, but that he wants to ask a question. He asked, Ramesh Sternbach, I think, asks that if that's the case, this blessing that Hashem gave to Shabbos was for a very limited period of time. If we were referring to that Hashem blessed Shabbos, that we got a double portion of man on Friday for Shabbos, so then that was for the 40 years of the desert. So that's a very, that means that before we didn't have that blessing, now we don't have that blessing. So why is the Torah, elaborating on this blessing if it doesn't really exist anymore? So, and he says, and my Rishiva said something very similar, that this blessing is really something that continues to exist to this day. And that's a blessing that the way my Rishiva put it is that when Hashem cursed Adam, which is later in this Parsha, Hashem cursed the land, that by the sweat of your brow you'll eat bread, and you won't just be given your food like in the Garden of Eden, the fruits were on the tree for the picking. You're going to have to work really hard for your bread, and the earth isn't going to cooperate all the time. Whereas Shabbos, since Hashem blessed Shabbos, it wasn't subject to that curse. And Shabbos, we don't have we don't have to work for our bread. And the way Moshe Sternbach says it, in which he's going specifically on this verse, that is that double portion of man, which means, what does that mean? That we didn't need man on Shabbos because whatever we needed on Shabbos, we got before. It fell on Friday. That applies even these days, that if someone accepts that they're going to keep Shabbos, so their parnasa is Hashem gives them their parnasa. Hashem gives them their salary and their sustenance in a form that they don't need it. They don't need that work on Shabbos. And the way my Rosh Hashiva put it was that people, when she's found many people who were growing in their observance, but Shabbos was a sticking point because they looked at their finances and said, I can't. The way my business, I can't survive. My business can't survive. I can't survive financially without being open on Shabbos or without working on Shabbos. It's impossible. It's impossible. My finances can't. Hebrew can't be several Shabbos. It can't take that day off on Saturday. And he said, they're right. They're not wrong about that. They're right. But he says, when a person starts keeping Shabbos, that changes. And that's a result of this blessing, is that someone who doesn't keep Shabbos needs that work on Shabbos, but someone who keeps Shabbos doesn't. That the blessing of Shabbos is that we get a double portion on Friday, we get a portion throughout the week that allows us to have our parnasa in spite of not having Shabbos, which is that double portion symbolized by the 2 loaves of bread that we have by each Shabbos meal. Okay, and this is also a function almost. We say in benching, when we bench on Shabbos, we say that may the Harachmanu Yanchilenu Yom Shakula Shabbos Imnucha, that Hashem should grant you a day that is always Shabbos. And what does that? That means that we're referring to the world to come. That Shabbos is they call it a dogma. It's almost like an example of the world to come. That the world to come is like Shabbos. It's a day where we're not working. We're not involved in not involved in our day-to-day life, and not involved in thinking about what I need tomorrow. And all that stuff that I have to do. It's a day to kind of exist outside of all that and just exist spiritually. We go to davening longer. We listen to the Torah reading. We hopefully study Torah in addition to that, and we eat in honor of the Shabbos and drink in the honor of the Shabbos, and that's what it's really the world to come. It's a day that we're not living in this world. We're not worried about anything about this world. We're living in just a kind of a spirit where it's almost like we leave this world and exist elsewhere. And that's, and a part of that is that there's no worry of parnasa. There's no worry about our job. And I know someone told me, someone here who has a business, and he probably would benefit a lot, or at least in a surface level, he'd benefit a lot from running his business on Shabbos. But he said that he walks through this door on Friday for a Kabbalah Shabbos, and all thoughts of, any concerns about, there's this problem at work and that problem at work, and I'm short this much money, and there's all that to pay, and we have all this inventory, I have to replace that. He says, like, he walks into shul, that's gone. And he has that 24 whatever hours or 26 hours of Shabbos where it's completely off the mind, and Shabbos is over. You could start thinking about that again, but it's just a load off the mind. He's not existing. That doesn't exist on Shabbos. Okay, so now moving on, the creation of man. Oh, one other thing I wanted to say here, and as usual, we get through the 7 days of creation at the Parsha ends. I was talking about starting from the end this year, but I don't think I've given on Bereishis in a few years, so I figured we'll review the beginning. But and Rabbi Nidickman hasn't done the beginning for about 10 years, so. Okay, so the Ramban says this last word here in verse 3. Hashem blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because on it he abstained from all his work which Hashem created to make. Like Hashem created la'asas, to create, to. So he says, what does that mean? It could be Hashem created for that work to produce, or the Ramban says it could be, as he said, that originally Hashem created everything at one moment. The first moment Hashem created all material and anything in existence that will be used to form everything that was created afterwards. That's to form everything afterwards. But he says that the 6 days of creation is really an introduction, and it's a summary of what's to come later. And that is that we say in Tehillim that a day of Hashem is like a 1 day for us is like 1,000 days for Hashem. So, the other way, or 1 day for Hashem is like 1,000, whatever. 1 year for us is like 1,000 years for Hashem, or whatever. The opposite. The point that that one of Hashem's years is like 1,000 of our years. Yeah. When you 1 minute, one day for Hashem. Yeah. Well, Hashem is above time. It's something that I skipped in this class, but they talk about time in creation, and time did that. It's clear in the commentaries. As this Forno says on the first verse is Bereishis bara, that in the beginning Hashem created. I mentioned that there are different interpretations. There's this Forno is that Hashem created Bereishis. Hashem created a first, the concept of an order in time, that there's the first thing, then the second thing, because before creation, before anything existed other than Hashem, before there was anything, Hashem created anything, there was no concept of time. It was only once, and scientists in physics, they say the same thing. This, once again, this Forno Arishan, someone who's from close to 1,000 years ago, but I'm not sure exactly when he lived. At least 600 years ago. But they say that until there was matter, time didn't exist, because time is just a relationship of matter to matter. It's time. It's just like space. Space is a relationship of objects. Before anything was created, right? Before anything was existed, space didn't exist and time didn't exist. And they asked, what's on the outside? And the universe is expanding, the scientists say, which means that there's an end to the universe. The universe is expanding, which means that there's a beginning and end, because there also can't expand if there's no beginning and end, if it fills everything. So what's past the universe? There's no space there. There's no space past the universe, because space doesn't exist in that context. And there's no time past the universe, because it's only an expression. Time and space is only a relationship of. So beyond, basically, I think I say to say that anyone who thinks about, well, like what was before the universe was created, what's afterwards, which is the same idea, like what's on one side, what's past the universe, it's basically like they may as well just go crazy. It'll cause them to go insane. Yeah.
So we can look at the vibrations, see them added.
Yeah.
Right.
Vibrates over 9 billion times second.
And you could split each one in half or split each one into 1,000, right?
That the smallest amount of time vibration
Yes.
that cesium atom
Okay.
falls around.
But what about half of that? What about half of vibration? Okay. So that's a smaller increment. I learned this in like kindergarten or something, that there's always a higher number and there's a lower number. Okay, but let's continue just for another few minutes. Maybe summarize the rest of the parsha. Okay, let me finish this part, and then we'll summarize the rest of the parsha. Yeah, so the Ramban also says, so the Savannah says that time was created in the beginning. That's the first verse, that the first thing Hashem created was time. But it's here. Okay, I'll need my notes for this because I saw it inside very briefly this time. Okay, so the verse is 1,000 years in your eye is like one day. 1,000 years is like one day in the eyes of Hashem. So the 6 days of creation correspond to 6,000 years that the world will exist. And he says the first 1,000 was the life of Adam. Adam, first man, lived 1,000 years. So that's and he was, so during the first, that's the Hashem created light and darkness. You had the light of Adam, the first man. That was the first 1,000 years of creation. So the second 1,000 years begins with Noach and his sons, who were separated from the wicked. That you had really Noach and his sons were the righteous. Everyone else was wicked, and Hashem destroyed the entire world other than them. And that's the separation of the upper waters and the lower waters, was the separation of Noach and his sons. That 1,000 years ended with the Tower of Babel, and began the next 1,000 years. The third 1,000 years began with Avraham was 48 years old. I know Rabbi Slatus was during the auction was talking about gave a number, and I think it was 2048 was one of them that he asked. What happened in the year 2048? Then that's when Avraham was 48. That was when Avraham, or whatever it was, Avraham, and I think the 3,000, the third millennium began when Avraham was 48 years old, which is when he recognized, at that age, he recognized Hashem, and he called out to Hashem, and that went for the next 1,000 years until the building of the first temple, and that's represented by the flourishing of the third day of creation, which is the growth of the plants, which is growth and bearing fruit. That's Avraham. And the fourth millennium started, I think it's 72 years after the first Beis HaMikdash, the first temple was built, until 172 years, he says, after the destruction of the second temple. And that's represented by the lights put in the sky, the sun, the moon, the stars, the lights that guide us and tell us where we're going and give us light. And that's the Beis HaMikdash. What am I up to? The fifth millennium were when the Jews were stumbling through exile. And that's after the destruction of the second temple. And that's where the sea is filled with fish, that we're like fish in the sea, just trying to escape the bigger predator and the nets of those pursuing us. And the sixth millennium is which is the 5,000s. The sixth millennium is corresponds to the sixth day of creation, where Hashem created animals and beasts, which are a higher form of creation. And that's when people started, there was a greater recognition of God in the world, and maybe a lessening of idolatry. And that might correspond somewhat with, there's a Christianity spread and Islam spread, where they at least are recognizing Hashem, maybe not in the proper fashion, but there is recognition of more of a recognition of God spreading in the world. And it concludes with the creation of man, which would be the beginnings of the Mashiach, of the son of Mashiach, the son of David, arising. Okay. So now continues. So now basically Hashem creates man. Hashem separates. We said that man and woman, the Medrash says, were created as one, and Hashem took it. It's usually translated as a rib formed Chava from a rib from Adam. Rav Hur said that that's not what it means. And let's see if I can find this. And on page 15, in verse 21, so Hashem cast a deep sleep upon man, and he slept. He took one of his sides, and he filled in flesh in its place. Not the Rav Hur says Tsela does not mean a rib; it means a side. She was formed from like a full side of Adam. And he said, "This time is bone in my bone," and he recognized Chava as his wife, and they okay. And then we have the incident in the Garden of Eden, where Chava was seduced by the serpent to eat from the tree where she was prohibited to eat from. As it says on page 15, verse 6, and the woman perceived that the tree was good for eating, that was a light to the eyes, and that the tree was desirable as a means to wisdom, and she took of its fruits and ate. And the Rav Hirsch explains that what the serpent is the representative of animal life and the animal way of life, the animal way of looking at everything, which is instinct. And the snake, the serpent, was tempting Chava to, instead of using moral judgment, which is man's role, man's job in the world, instead just following her animal instincts, which are, what is it? That use your senses, your physical senses. Where is it? That she perceived that the tree was good for eating, it was tasty, it was the delight to the eyes, it looked good, and the tree was desirable as a means to wisdom, that everything about all the instincts say to eat it, it looks good. So she was convinced to eat it. She gave it to her husband. Okay, so then Hashem said, "What have you done?" And Hashem cursed them in verse 14 on page 17. Hashem said, "Cursed is the serpent from all the beasts of the field," and there will be a constant conflict between the snake and between women, and or between snakes and men. And in verse 16, he said to the woman, he said, "I'll greatly increase your suffering, your childbearing, in pain shall you bear your children, yet your craving shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you." Here we have the source of the patriarchy. And as the feminist movement will say, it is a curse. So, and they're really right that the patriarchy exists and it's a curse. This is the curse of Chava. And in verse 17 on page 19, to Adam he said, "Because you listened to the voice of your wife and ate of the tree about which I commanded you, saying you shall not eat it, accursed is the ground because of you. Through suffering shall you eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles shall it sprout for you, and you shall eat the herb of the field. By the sweat of your brow shall you eat bread until you return to the ground from which you were taken. For you are dust, and to dust you shall return." So Adam was cursed. With the land was a curse that once again obtaining food will be very difficult, as it says that by the sweat of your brow you should eat bread. I don't remember if it was Ramban but someone I saw in the commentary said that this is a hint, that it's a hint of good health, is that by the sweat of your brow shall eat bread, that a person should warm up a little bit before they eat, that they should do a little exercise before eating. This as an aside. And another thing the Ramban says is that to Adam he said, "Because you listened to the voice of your wife, accursed is the ground because of you," is that Adam's mistake. What was Adam's mistake? His mistake was he thought, he didn't realize that there was an option not to listen. Meaning, Hashem told him, Rabbi Slade is kind of harsh, but Hashem told him that I'm giving you a wife as an Ezer Kenegdo, as a help for you, that she's to be, told him she's to be your moral compass. That your wife is, meaning that you have to listen to what she said, listen to what she says, and if you're straying, she'll let you know. If she keeps you in line, she's your compass. But he took that to mean I have to, whatever she says, I have to do, rather than I have to listen and take into account what she's saying and understand that she's my moral compass. But ultimately, where'd the buck rest? Where? With the one who's doing whatever they're doing. And ultimately, whoever's acting is the one who's responsible for their act. Okay, so he was banished from the Garden of Eden. They had two sons, Cain and Hevel. And Rashi says that was actually before this is going back in his time, but they had Cain and Hevel. It says Hevel became a shepherd, Cain became a tiller of the ground. They brought an offering. Cain's was not accepted, Hevel's was accepted, and Cain killed Hevel. So I think that's what Kleyaker says. I right now I don't remember where I saw anything. I didn't write it down this time, but I saw that what was it? Well, what could have brought this to happen? That like he's killing his brother already? How could that enmity have developed so quickly? That the second generation already he's killing his brother. So they say that they had a very different. You see from what it says about their offerings. In verse 3, it says, after a period of time, Cain brought an offering to Hashem of the fruit of the ground, and for Hevel he brought the firstling of his flocks and from the choicest. So it says that Cain, what does that mean after a period of time? Meaning Cain, his thought process was, I grow my crops, I experience the bounty, I eat all the best of the crops, and then after I eat it, I have thanks to Hashem for everything that I received, and then I bring an offering to Hashem. And that's why it's after a period of time. Once he experienced the goodness of the crops, he ate the best of it. Now I have the greatest thanks to Hashem, and he brought the offering. Whereas by Hevel, it doesn't say that after a period of time. It says by Hevel, he brought the firstlings of his flocks from the choicest, meaning instead of waiting till he enjoyed the best of it, and then thanking Hashem for that, he proceeded and brought the best of it, as meaning I serve Hashem with the best of what I have. I don't wait till I experience something great and then thank Hashem. I serve Hashem from the beginning. And so because they had opposite approaches to life, where Cain's was love the physical, meaning experience the physical and thank Hashem for that with service, Hevel's was serve Hashem with what I have. And because they had opposite approaches to life, and Hevel's was validated, Cain saw that as himself being completely invalidated, his approach to life being invalidated. That's what caused this enmity. Okay, and so Cain was cursed, and he says, okay, and Hashem tells him, whoever slays Cain before 7 generations of that will be punished. And then in verse 17 on page 23, and Cain knew his wife, she conceived bore Chanoch. He became a city builder, and he named the city after his son Chanoch. The Malbim says he became a city builder, that it wasn't that he built one city, but he continuously built cities to kind of atone for the murder that he committed, to build civilization in order to prevent murder. But ultimately, we see that civilization didn't work, as it concludes here. In verse 23, and Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Sila, hear my voice, on page 23, verse 23. Ada and Sila, hear my voice, wives of Lamech, give ear to my speech. Have I slain a man by a wound and a child by a bruise? If Cain suffered vengeance in 7 generations, then Lamech at 77, then Lamech said, look, I killed people, and nobody did anything to me because I'm a strong man. So he's saying, in spite of the civilization Cain tried to build, his grandson or descendant was immune, because he was just might makes right. Okay, and then it goes through the genealogy of mankind from all the way from Adam to Noah. And it concludes that people began sinning, and Hashem said that he was going to destroy the world, as we'll see next week in Parshas Noah. Okay,